The other day I had this phrase pop in my head. Only what's done for Christ will last. I didn't even know where it came from, so I actually had to look it up, and it's from a poem from C.T. Studd, an Englishman in the late 1800s. But he's talking about how do we spend our time? How do we spend our energy? How do we give our lives for things that really matter? There's so many things that clamor for our attention. There's so many things that demand our attention. But what really matters? And how do we live for things that don't pass away? How do we live for things that don't wear out? How do we live for the eternal? How do we make the most of every opportunity that is given to us? Because the eternal is what matters most. How do we give our lives to things that are really significant? I found a really interesting article on C.T. Studd written by Stephen Ross. Studd was born into great wealth. His father made a fortune in India, came back to England to spend it. C.T. Studd was just this great cricket player. He went on to outstanding careers. But in 1877, his father encountered Jesus Christ in a real and personal way. And his father, Edward, became concerned about the spiritual well-being of his three sons. So when C.T. was saved at the age of 18, when a visiting preacher at their house caught C.T. on the way to go play cricket with a simple question, "Are you a Christian?" C.T.'s answer was not convincing enough. And so the guest leaned in and asked again, "Are you a Christian?" And C.T. tells what happens as he finally acknowledged God's gift of eternal life. And right then and right there, joy and peace came into my soul. I knew then what it meant to be born again. And the Bible, which had been so dry to me, became everything. But there was a long period of some 6 years where C.T. lived in a backslidden state. He said, instead of going and telling others about the love of Christ, I was selfish. I kept the knowledge to myself. And the result was that gradually my love became cold and the love of the world began to come in. But what happened in C.T.'s life is that everything was changed. And Jesus became everything for him. He was bold and courageous in radical ways. He had a quote where he said, "Some wish to live within the sound of a church or chapel bell. I want to run a rescue shop within a yard of hell." Whether we are trying to diligently do our jobs, do well in school, have fun in our hobbies, our lives are filled with opportunity. Filled with moments that have eternity at stake if we just see them. Because what we do matters. Our choices matter. Our attitudes and our perspective matter. We can be lost in the individual moments of our lives. We can be caught up in what's happening right here, right now. Or we could also have a bigger perspective that maybe God would like us to have and ask questions like, what does it all really mean? What really matters? What can I do that lasts? Like C.T. Studd said, only what's done for Christ will last. I love this passage the Apostle Paul writes in 1 Thessalonians 2 that is going to anchor us today. In verse 11, Paul writes, "For you know that we dealt with each of you as a father deals with his own children, encouraging, comforting, and urging you to live lives worthy of God, who calls you into his kingdom and glory." There's three words there that Paul speaks about: encouraging, comforting, and urging, and the power that these have to shape lives. But all three words really focus on our words, our speech, our ability, whether through a text, whether through a phone call, or a face-to-face conversation, to speak words that give life, to speak words, first of all, that encourage. To encourage is to strengthen, to instruct, or to teach. It's to speak words, not shout from a distance, but have a conversation up close and personal. It's not a one-time thing to say something once. It's an ongoing dialogue to engage with God. That's why in Matthew 5, Jesus says, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. There's a time for mourning and the right words in those moments. There's a time for comforting in those moments. That's why Paul writes in 2 Corinthians 5, we are therefore Christ's ambassadors, as though God were making his appeal through us. We implore you on Christ's behalf, be reconciled to God. Even our words for others for the sake of God. It's almost like our voices, our words are echoes of God's words in this world for the sake of others, inviting them into this story. It's the power of our words. These things matter for souls and spirits, for salvation, because no moment is an ordinary moment. It's to make the most, the eternal, of the moments we have in this life. So the Apostle Paul gives a couple of words here. First, encouraging. Be encouraging. Speak words that lift up. Second, he says, comforting. Comforting is this word that means to bring calm into an anxious situation. In 1 Thessalonians 5:14, Paul uses this word again, and he says, we urge you, brothers and sisters, warn those who are idle and disruptive. Encourage or comfort the disheartened. Help the weak. Be patient with everyone. These are the kinds of words that bring calm to an anxious soul. One of my biggest regrets in high school was I quit varsity basketball my junior year of high school. There was a coach who was just vicious with his words, and I couldn't handle it. So that's the real reason I quit, is I couldn't handle it. I had made this big mistake in scrimmage. I made a turnover, and he yelled something out that completely humiliated me. In a moment where I needed comfort and calm, abusive words were heaped upon me, humiliating me in front of a stands full of people. See, this word has the idea, comforting, of meeting someone where they are and helping bring a settledness to them. There's a power to these kinds of words. What I needed was not a reprimand. Everybody knew I made a mistake. I needed somebody to help me in the moment, to give me some comfort. Now, we may not be able to take back past words that we have said to others that have hurt, but we can make a decision to go forward and be comforting kind of people. There's a nuance here to this, that biblically speaking, giving comfort is not to make others comfortable. Biblically speaking, giving comfort is to make someone useful for God's work. That's why Paul says in Ephesians 6, fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. You see, there's the kind of training that has eternal rewards. There's the kind of instruction that matters for eternity. And we've got to aim for the eternal, not just be distracted by what's temporary. And we're called to focus on this with this kind of comfort that we can offer others because we've received it from God ourselves. The Apostle Paul gives us these words to be encouraging, to be comforting, but also he says urging ourselves and others to live a life that's worthy. Let me read the verse again. 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 12. Urging you to live lives worthy of God, who calls you into his kingdom and his glory. To urge like this, it's to give a charge. It's to give a good report. It's to testify. It's to be an example for God. And Paul, just like John in his letters, they say we're to give a charge to others. We're to encourage and comfort and also charge. Give people a mission worth living for. What mission are you living for? I have to ask myself the same question. What mission am I living for? It's so easy to be distracted by the things of this earth. It's so easy to strive after what everybody else is striving for. And yet we're called to urge each other to live a life that's worthy of the kingdom of God, to give a charge to one another that makes a difference in this world and the next. One of the things I love about C.T. Studd's story is the legacy that his father left him. The impact that was made by a father's decision to follow Jesus on his son and then on to many others. Studd was a part of what is known as the Cambridge Seven. They left their school in Cambridge and they went to China to start a missions work. He's known as one of the founders of the student volunteer movement, that as he toured America and universities, college students from America went all over the world on mission for Jesus. And he's known for joining with others in taking the gospel into the region of Africa that was the most unevangelized at that time, and radically following Christ and giving an example for others to join in as well. And this was at great sacrifice. It was at great cost to Studd, like following God always is, like focusing on the eternal and not the temporary is all the time. At 25 years of age, Studd inherited his father's fortune. He was loaded. And he didn't want it to be a distraction from the gospel. He didn't want it to be a distraction from the mission God had called him to. So you know what he did? He gave it all away. He gave everything away to other work for God all over the world, because he didn't want anything on this earth to distract him from fulfilling the mission that God had for him. Now, I don't think God is asking us to give away every single thing that we have. But what is he calling you to sacrifice? Where could he be asking you to refocus? Where could he say, hey, you're too captivated by the things of this world. You need to see what's eternal. You need to see a bigger picture. You need to stop worrying about success and move to significance. So as the Apostle Paul writes in 2 Corinthians 4, "Therefore we do not lose heart. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen. Since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal." It took me a while to realize where that quote came from. Only what's done for Christ will last. It's a poem that C.T. Studd wrote. Let me read a part of it to you. He writes, "Only one life, the still small voice, gently pleads for a better choice, bidding me selfish aims to leave, and to God's holy will to cleave. Only one life, 'twill soon past. Only what's done for Christ will last. Faithful and true, whate'er the strife, pleasing thee in my daily life. Only one life, 'twill soon be past. Only what's done for Christ will last." It's not about what you accomplish. It's not about what I accomplish. It's not about what skills we have alone. See, the best things are the eternal things. The most successful things are significant things. It's the investments we make in others for eternity, God's kingdom, that matters the most. This is a junkyard. Doesn't it all end up here? The things that just are temporary. Yet God's kingdom is eternal. And He wants us to live for things that are unseen, for things that won't go away. Our time, our energy, our opportunity, but most of all, our relationships. They are to be given everything, encouraging, comforting, and urging others to live a godly life that will matter and that will last and endure forever. For God's glory and for the good of others, let's live well.